This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome to The Edge, Trek FM's podcast on Star Trek Discovery, which is going to be launching in just a couple of weeks. This episode is coming to you on September 1st. We're just about 3 weeks away from a brand new Star Trek series. And we've got three fine gentlemen with me today to talk about one of the neat aspects that's going to be shown to us on screen. Joining me today is Aaron Harvey. How are you doing, Aaron?
I'm hanging in there. It's 1,000,000 degrees in Los Angeles, so we're all kind of like melting away.
You could get a Ziploc bag and fill it with ice and stuff them in your shirt. That might work.
That would be good.
Yeah, it would be nice and chilly. Richard Marquez down in Colorado?
Yep, Colorado, Denver.
Yeah. Denver, Colorado. Right on. I think we were talking about that just before we started recording. How are you doing today in your 70 degrees?
Absolutely cool.
Nice and cool. Yeah. And joining us for his second/first guest spot on The Edge is Tim Robertson. How are you doing, Tim?
I am fantastic. How is everybody tonight?
We are doing good. It was nice to have you on yesterday joining Amy to discuss the mailbag and the fan response to the early reactions to Star Trek The Next Generation. So that
did have a lot of fun. She's fun.
Yes. And Amy, I hope you're listening. I just wanted to start this episode off by saying Deanna Troi, counselor of the ship Enterprise D. Right, Amy? Yeah. If anybody listened yesterday, Tim didn't want them mentioned yesterday, so that's the only reason he agreed.
That was my agreement to go on, yeah.
So,
what, you won't talk about Deanna?
Yeah.
Are we going to go on a tangent?
Okay.
He loves Deanna, right? It's your favorite character, right?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
No. Oh,
No.
Okay.
No.
Anyways, we're not here to talk about Deanna. We're here to talk about Star Trek Discovery, which is, as I said, coming in just a couple of weeks. And tonight's topic is the Klingons. And I can't really think of anything that caused as much controversy as when the Klingons were announced and then we got our first look of the Klingons. What do you guys think? Do you think there was anything related to Star Trek Discovery that caused as much controversy as these aliens coming to the show and what they look like?
The Discovery?
The ship itself, you think?
Ship? Yeah. Well, maybe not. Yeah. I think they're equal in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
The uniform was a big controversy too.
Really? You heard about the uniform?
I saw so many responses on that. People did not like the uniform at all.
I think in majority circles, though, it died pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No,
There's
that's
a lot
true.
of people who really like it now, but now it's sort of like you still have the diehards that are, it's the wrong color. It needs to be, the division colors, or it should be a velour collar or whatever. But in general, most people, I think, are really kind of latching onto it, and especially since some people have actually cosplayed some of it, and they're like getting into it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Tim, what do you think? You think the Klingons were the big factor?
I think CBS All Access was the biggest factor.
Yeah, that could
People
be
don't
too.
want to pay for it. People don't want to pay for it.
Yeah, so there's a few things, but Klingons is definitely one of them, and they changed their look. And we're going to kind of talk tonight. We're just going to have a general discussion on the Klingons themselves. We're going to go through a little bit of their history throughout the series. And they were originally introduced way back in Season 1 of Star Trek, the original series, with an episode called Errand of Mercy. And Tim, now you if I understood correctly, yes, sir, you were watching this in first run, right?
Yes, I was. I was 9 years old when Star Trek first came out. We had just got our RCA color TV about a month earlier, so it was pretty cool. Yeah.
Now, do you remember when Errand of Mercy first aired, or maybe a second airing? Do you remember what it was like to see these Klingons, and did it have any ramifications for you because of what was going on politically in the world at the time?
I was 9. So, no, it really didn't affect it. It didn't affect me. I thought they were kind of cool, Klingon. It was, yeah. But actually, they had no real effect on me at all.
Okay. Because originally, it was the Russians that they were designed to be. Was it the Russians that they were designed as like this science fiction replacement for?
Russians and Nazi Germany, I believe. That's what Gene Kuhn was aiming for, that type of protagonist, or antagonist, yeah.
Now, we didn't actually see the Klingons that many times in the original series, but their look, because of the time, the look of the Klingons was, kind of limited. They could, they kind of had a blackface paint to them with this Asian-style mustache, right? And these very, very basic Bumblebee-style uniforms, basically. Richard, why are you holding back the laughter? You can laugh. It's okay.
I just love how you're describing the Asian style mustache.
Well, it kind of is it not? I don't know. It kind of
it's a Fu Manchu.
No, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking.
I'm from. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be politically incorrect. I'm trying to describe it here, and Richard's laughing his butt off here at me. So, but how would you describe it?
I was just thinking that they're just, very tanned. As soon as you said the Asian style mustache, I just thought it was like maybe they're just very well tanned Asians. I don't know.
Well tanned Asians. Interesting. Okay, well,
that's all I had on it.
That's it.
You should probably stop there. That's good.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on The Edge.
But no contact information?
A bit of trivia. Did you know where the name Klingon came from?
No.
Gene Roddenberry had a lieutenant that he worked with in the LAPD, and apparently the guy was kind of difficult to work with, let's just say. But his name was Wilbur Klingon, and it was spelled Klingan, and Klingon. So that's where he actually got the name for Klingon. Just one of his co-workers he had in the LAPD.
Okay. That's kind of interesting.
I did not know that.
I hadn't heard that story.
Oh.
Thereby.
Phew. Pays being old.
Well, I'm checking on Memory Alpha here, and they were in 7 episodes of the original series. We had Errand of Mercy from season 1, Friday's Child, The Trouble with Tribbles, and A Private Little War in season 2, Alon of Troyes in season 3, Day of the Dove, and The Savage Curtain as well in season 3. So we didn't get a lot of them. However, we did have 3 kind of main villains that ended up becoming kind of the 3 pillars of what the Klingons stood for. We had Kor, Kang, and Koloth. And Aaron, we ended up seeing one of these guys on the animated series, didn't we?
Yes, we saw Kor.
Well, it was Kor that we had in The Time Trap.
Okay, then he's the one who went on to eventually be on Deep Space Nine as well.
Well, all 3 of them did. All 3 of them went on to Deep Space Nine, and
Koloth.
And then
I guess Koloth was also there
in the More Troubles, More Troubles.
Marvels. Yep.
Yeah. So
yeah, we had both Kor and Koloth in the animated series. We also had one of the the second female Klingons. It was Khaleesi, I think, or something like not Khaleesi. That's from Game of Thrones. It was.
Don't we wish it was Khaleesi?
Yes, it was Kali, and she was the one in the time trap who put the what we call the vitamin bomb in the in the Enterprise that was supposed to explode once they got out of the vortex, and basically the Klingons would have taken off and the Enterprise would have been destroyed. So it was really interesting to see, that they actually had a mix of characters in there. And, of course, talking about uniforms, when you were talking about the Bumblebee, was that these were purple because it's the animated series. So, and they actually just recently released a kind of a top you can buy that has the from Anavos, which is the kind of a t-shirt version of the Klingon from the animated series. But Yeah, so the interesting thing is when, we always talk about how, the Klingons are redesigned for the motion picture, and they were redesigned, now they're being redesigned and it's all a big kerfuffle. They actually had talked about redesigning it for the animated series. And a lot of the things that they sort of tried to introduce, and some of it actually did make it into the motion picture, would have went into the animated series. So it was in March of 73. Basically, Gene is like, oh shoot, I remember we talked about wanting to redesign the Klingons because the only reason they were fully humanoid was because of, human actors and budget. So it was like, they said, as we get further out in deep space, they're more likely to be less humanoid aliens. So they were talking about either moving the Klingons to being more reptile, octopus, sort of Cretaceous, or having those creatures basically defeat the Klingon Empire and take over and use their materials and their ships, which would have been interesting. And so when they went to the motion picture, and somebody, you may have seen them out there, comparing the new Klingons to that, they had very similar look, even like the clothing, except their hands were more like, kind of like tentacles and stuff. So, early on there was the discussion of making them even a little more odder than they were in the motion picture.
Because the main limitation with the original series back in the mid-'60s was, budget and makeup and what they could handle for a TV budget, right? They couldn't do a lot. So,
and thinking back to the original, I mean, now that I think about it, when's the first time I realized what the Klingons were? I think it was The Trouble with Tribbles. I think that's also an episode I've seen 100 times as well. But that's the one that stands out probably when I was younger because that was a fun episode too to watch. So,
right on. Now we get into the movies and we've got a change in look with them again. They start introducing the forehead, and it's basically the Klingon commander that we see in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. He's got a very limited forehead ridges. At least that's how I've always seen it. It's very similar to General Chang's forehead ridges in Star Trek 6. And when you get into Star Trek 3, they've got these large, Turtlehead, Little Miss Turtlehead on their foreheads. It's very big, and it's so these Klingons have ever evolved, and the look of these Klingons has always evolved a little bit. But once we get into the Next Generation and we have Worf on the bridge, and we have a more constant presence of the Klingons, we start to get a backstory for their culture. And Ronald D. Moore came on in season 3 and really started to flush out the Klingons and honor and stuff like this. We got a little bit of it in the season 1 episode. I think it was called Heart of Glory, with that death ritual and the death yelling up at the sky, which is really fascinating. But Ronald D. Moore really brought this interesting aspect to the Klingons. Now, what did you guys think of that? Because to me, I don't see that in the original series, this honor background and this honor culture. I don't really see that when I watch the original series episodes. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, the original series, I saw them as a biker gang. Basically, they're just a bunch of hard-ass guys that would want to beat up on everybody and pick on the Enterprise.
See, I was thinking like they were like, I guess a 24th century version of sea pirates or something like that. Like pirates that just out there to cause mischief and basically get in our way, sort of thing. So yeah. But yeah, definitely did not see honor or anything like that. I mean, definitely it was. I mean, yeah, it definitely wasn't like anything what we see today or with TNG and Deep Space Nine. So, and even Voyager, yeah.
I felt they were almost more like a little bit more Romulan. It was like the Romulan and Klingons didn't have as much difference between them, and which kind of made sense when they like had the Romulan Klingon, started using their ships and painting things on. The different vehicles. Obviously, that was a reuse because of budget. But I'm like, okay, culturally, they don't seem that disparate. But when you think of the Romulans and Klingons now, you're like, how did those two ever do anything together? So...
Right, because with Balance of Terror in the original series with the Romulans, you almost get more of this honor culture in that episode because of... how the one guy's like, I'm tired of war. Do we really need to be doing this? He doesn't say it, but it's like, is it honorable to be sneaking around and testing this new cloaking device that's designed for weapons. At least that's the impression I've always got from that episode. And in The Next Generation, the personality traits almost rotated between the Klingons and the Romulans. And on a little bit of a tangent here, I'm a big reader of the novels, and I actually always find it always pulls me out of it when I read a story that takes place in the original series that's written now, and all these aspects of honor and batliths and diktogs and, all these weapons and stuff, they bring it up and they start talking about it in an original series time frame. To me, it always takes me out of it because we never heard those things during that era. So I don't know, do you guys ever retroactively in your mind do the retcon or whatever they call it, that they've always been that way and we just didn't see these particular Klingons acting that method? Or what do you guys think?
I think in the original they were just one-dimensional. I mean, that was it. They were warriors, and that's all we ever saw. But you mentioned earlier Ronald Moore. I mean, he's the guy that brought depth to the species. Basically, he became the Klingon author of their background, and that's where I think in Next Gen you saw that develop, and on the Voyager and everything else.
I think we kind of need to use depth in air quotes too, because it's it is, but for an 80s TV show. Good point. They're space Vikings. I mean, there's a story, but it's not as deep. That's why I'm actually excited about Discovery, because it feels like if they're using modern 21st century storytelling with all the other things that are available to us, internet, videos that are connected to backstories and bits and pieces and multimedia that aren't where the story isn't only just on the show, it's in other mediums. It's I have a feeling we can get a bigger, more filled out world. And with the Klingons during TNG, you had the books that weren't canon, you had comics that weren't canon, and that was about it.
And now you're going to have comics that are canon, and they'll probably have a series of Klingon comics. I mean, that's they're considering them canon until they do something on screen that changes it that they want to. But I think they've been during the whole Kelvin cycle. I think IDW has worked out a pretty decent way of communicating with the people who are working on Star Trek. So I think they have carried that over into working with the people who are doing the Prime universe as well. So I think there's a better chance of what happens in the comics reflecting the television show, as opposed to the first TNG comic that had the two bickering husband and wives that worked on the bridge, the Bickleys or whatever, and they ran around in capes for some reason. And it's just they had these
that's canon in my head. Yeah, that's canon.
You're right. These have nothing to do with the story, but so I feel I'm hoping that we actually do, because Klingons to me have always been. We always joke that if we see a show about anything that the guy from Game of Thrones who plays Conan and Aquaman and all, is he plays the same character. He plays a Klingon. He's not a Klingon, but it's that. It's fighting, honor. I don't know. I've never felt the depth that everybody claims that they see. I like the idea. I'm just hoping that we get more how did these people get into space? Because that makes no sense.
We've never seen a Klingon engineer.
No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See, the Klingons have always been portrayed as
half Klingon engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had one. We saw one.
True. Half.
And it was a female.
Not full Klingon.
Yeah, B'Elanna. Is that what you mean?
No. I'm talking about in TNG. It was about the metaphasic shielding.
Suspicions?
Oh, that's right.
It's always about the metaphysics shielding. Come on.
I know, right?
Was she an engineer or was she a scientist?
I want to say she was a... man, you're going to have to make me look it up.
Sorry.
I think you should talk to somebody that does a TNG podcast.
I know.
Well, we just talked
somebody
about
that did TNG podcast on here.
Shush! I know it's in season 5. Shh.
It's not. It's in season 6.
No, we're in season 5.
Right, but it's in Suspicions, which is in season 6. The Beverly Crusher episode, right?
Shut up.
The Beverly Crusher episode, right?
Hold on.
6.
Yep. You got to look it up, Richard.
No, I don't.
On a side note here, we'll be posting a job application for a new Earl Grey host.
Oh, job applications, huh? Because I get paid.
Well, we didn't. We didn't have a job application, and we ended up with you. So
you guys suck. You guys suck.
But I did not mean to derail it. It was just like that's sort of been my like. I'm really hoping that we get a little bit more depth than beyond the 80s depth that we got, which was still great for what it was. It just didn't feel quite as. It's not as great as I think people's memories. It's sort of like when you think of Tron, you're like, Tron's amazing, and then you're like, Tron wasn't as amazing as it could have been, but it is still pretty awesome, you know.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe depth wasn't the right word to use, but I know in Vegas when the writers were talking about what they're going to do with the Klingons, there's going to be standalone Klingon episodes, basically, where they're going to talk about them, and that's really exciting to me. I mean, that's going to be fun.
And she was an expert in field subspace morphology. So no, she wasn't.
What season, Richard? What season?
Shut up.
So I never understood the love of the Klingons myself. Like I don't know. They've never been my favorite alien race on Star Trek, and this is the one that, you know, when people do cosplaying and dressing up for the Star Trek conventions, this is one of the most common alien races that's dressed up as. And so, have Klingons? Have they been the species for any of you guys?
I have never personally dressed up as a Klingon, but my son, his very first Star Trek convention back in 1995, he wanted to be a Klingon. So I dressed him up like a Klingon. I bought the forehead piece and everything, and he was, 12 years old, so it was cool. But I would not dress up like a Klingon.
No, you would dress up as a Ferengi?
No, I would dress up like a original series Star Trek officer, which is what I do.
And Richard's got his Voyager engineering outfit.
Yeah, I do, don't I? Yeah. No, I actually...
And he's wearing it right now.
Yeah.
I've always liked some of the design aspects of the Klingons, which I thought was really interesting. But as far as story goes, like kind of that goes back to the feeling that it sort of lacked depth. For me, I was like, when I heard it, it was sort of like, oh, good, we're going to have a lot of Klingons. That was just sort of like, and then it was just, oh, and Harry Mudd's coming back. Like, all right, I guess it's like, we're getting Star Trek, so I'll just be quiet. But it was like, but the more I hear about the Klingons, the more excited I am. And I think it could be a really interesting, piece to the puzzle and filling in some of those, like, oh, how did these things happen in their,
And the actors are really going to be speaking Klingon. I mean, they're going to have English subtitles. Now, how awesome is that? I mean,
I think
the actors are saying they want to be fluent in the language, and they're getting there because they have linguists on the set and everything helping them out.
Well, they do that in Game of Thrones with Valerian, right? I mean, I think it's great when they do that, and I think that a show like Game of Thrones has shown that they can do things like that, and it's not going to detract from their audience at all simply by having subtitles, right? I mean, subtitles aren't a bad thing. Right. I mean, there's so much great cinema in the world that's not in English, right? Like, I mean, it's ridiculous to think that the only.
Well, I've never seen it because I don't read the subtitles, so.
So Richard's the only person who won't like the Klingons.
Yeah, probably not.
But let's jump on to Discovery, because I don't think there's much more to talk about with regards to DS9 and Voyager. There's a lot of cool characters in DS9. Like we got there's Gowron. There's some really cool stuff. But I think by the time Enterprise, as the Warp 5 host here, by the time I got to Enterprise, I was tired of the Klingons. So when I originally heard that the Klingons were going to be huge into this, I'm just like, oh, for crying out loud. But again, yes, I'm really excited based on what I've heard, and that we're going to be getting a different look at this alien race than we've ever had before.
It feels like it's going to break away from the monoculture, which would be nice,
right? Because
everything, it's like they're spread across star systems. You're telling me that the culture is going to stay static across all these planets, and it seems unrealistic.
Right. See, one of the things that I like about the Cardassians so much is that throughout the entire run of Deep Space Nine, we were constantly presented with different types of Cardassians. And every time we saw a Ferengi, he was basically greedy. I understand there's like one or two one-offs, and every time we were presented with a Klingon, he was a warrior and stuff. And so, yes, we had a Klingon lawyer in Star Trek VI. Yes, we had a Klingon lawyer in Star Trek VI, the remake, also known as the episode Judgment on Enterprise, right? But, so when you see those things, it doesn't feel right to me, because that's not how that alien race is in that series. And they're presented that way because they're presented as a reflection of something in our society. Right? And in a nutshell, the Cardassians were a reflection of our entire humanity because there's so many different aspects of them. But this is what's going to be neat about the new Klingons in Discovery is that we're going to see everything, and I think it's going to feel legit.
I hope so. I really do. I really hope so because I mean, I personally love everything that's Klingon. I really love everything that. I mean, actually, I think I have the. I do have the DVD where it has all the Klingon episodes, and even obviously some of them are missing, but still, I can't wait to see what's going on. I mean, a lot of people are saying that that doesn't look like the original, and I'm like, come on, guys, really? I mean, change with the times, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, let's bring in something new. Let's bring in something fresh. If that's exactly what they were, if that's exactly what they were intending it for, let's say they had an unlimited budget and they have the technology that we have today, when it comes to cosmetics and all that, why not? Mm-hmm. It probably would be the same. So, I mean, I don't know, but I'm excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy Klingons changed. I wasn't upset about it. I mean, I don't understand what the turmoil is with this. I mean, it's a budget too. I mean, in Vegas they had the displays of the bat'leth and the Klingon knives and the uniforms, and oh my God, the money that they're spending and the detail, the attention to detail. If you've seen the photographs online of just the uniform of the Klingon emblem, I mean, it's a guy falling. I never saw that before. It was never anything like that. But now this is what they're showing you, what the actual emblem means, and the bat'leth just blew me away. It was the coolest thing I ever saw. I mean, I can't wait to see just what they're doing with the costumes and everything else.
Well, Aaron, with you running the Saturday Morning Trek show, do you remember, was there any backlash from the fans when the motion picture came out and the Klingons looked different? Do you know?
I was pretty young, but I don't feel like anybody was just like, they're like, oh, those are Klingons now, all right. And then it just sort of went on. I don't know if it was because everybody was so happy to see it back, but I don't remember reading anything in Starlog. I don't remember. I know my friends didn't. There was nobody who was just like, oh, I think they thought they were kind of cool, honestly.
I think that was my response. Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's like, wow, they now, they were able to do something that we kind of knew they always wanted to do, because I think in 79 it was still like, okay, Star Trek is new and moving forward as opposed to reflecting back. So it was sort of like, we saw this, we made fun of this thing, this aspect of the show, now we can fix that and really blow it out with a lot of money or something like that. It's like, so, I mean, granted, I was young, but I don't remember anyone making a huge fuss over it. But it sounds like neither did you, Tim.
No, I was more enamored with the pajamas that they wore.
The Bumblebee.
I just love the ship. I just that was like it's still my favorite Enterprise.
And I don't mind that 5-minute sequence at the beginning of it either, where they fly around the show. Show it to me for 20 minutes. I want to see that ship. That's my baby.
Well, their Klingon ships were great too.
Whenever that shot comes on, when Kirk and Scotty are going around in that little thing, I turn up my music as loud as I can when I'm watching it, just so I can listen to that cue by Goldsmith. Just to have 5 minutes of that music playing. And that's such a beautiful piece because it's the theme, but it's, a little bit slower, a little bit different, right? And then it's a little bit more triumphant, when you get the first shot.
I'm getting goosebumps right now. I don't know if you can see.
We'll be back in 2 hours, everybody, after we go watch Star Trek The Motion Picture. We'll be right
pause
back.
of the podcast. Go.
It's where we also get the beginning of we get that actual Klingon soundtrack too, that score.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's sort of like we get yeah. It's great because we actually have there's that equal, the equivalent of what or Starfleet has. It has, the Klingons have. So it'll be curious to see how they, if we hear a little bit of that in Discovery. If there's
that would be cool.
Back to that.
Right on. Now, Aaron, you had reached out to a few of the members of Star Trek Discovery, and while they weren't allowed to give us any information, which we didn't expect, they were all able to give us a little bit of a comment. Did you want to read some of the comments that you got from some of the staff members?
Yeah, well, we were talking about, talking Klingon all together. First, let me start with Robin Stewart, who's sort of the official translator, and it's kind of a funny story because we've been following each other on Twitter before, and I had found something in a screenshot from the thing, and I sent it to her, and I was like, hey, you translate for for the Klingon Language Institute. It's like, can you help me out with that? And she's just like, sure, like, and she kept kind of hedging her bets and like, let me just pause this and come back to it later. I'm like, okay. And it turns out it's because she is the official translator and she couldn't say it until shortly after that. So it was really funny. It was like, now I can't tell you anything. I'm like, great. But she said that she's really been kind of stunned by the depth of the canon references. She's like, she said, more than once I've had to replay part of an episode from one of the previous series in order to get the context I need for translation. The office is full of canon and non-canon, but delightfully historical reference materials. Edited clips of Klingon dialogue comes back and forth to me until they're just right. Mm-hmm. So, and she said that, people need to kind of remember that we all form our own headcanon. So when Star Trek goes to try to correct a weakness, because, if you laid out Star Trek's timeline or the stories, logistically and logically, they don't all work out.
What?
You got, yes. So I think she said that, Star Trek isn't perfect any more than we are, but it strives, and it says we can strive. So basically, they're doing their best, I think, to marry all the disparate series into, the further you get out, the more and more things are kind of fall apart because people aren't perfect, and you've got timelines that don't match and stories about Klingons that might not match other stories and how they're historical. Just like real history. So I think it's really interesting that she's recognizes that I think they all recognize that. So they're all trying to do the best they can, and you're never going to please everybody. It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So Ken Mitchell, who plays, is it Core? So he said, please say hi to the fans for me. I can't wait for the audience to have another Star Trek series to explore. Oh, excited for Cole K-O-L, to come to life on screen and be part of the rich history of the Klingon Empire and canon. And, basically a lot of the stuff that they've talked about, they've kind of already, as much as they can say, they've told Entertainment Weekly and Star Trek Las Vegas. And then Mary Shifo, who plays L'Rell, she's basically said, there's not much more she can say than what's already been articulated in the various interviews and articles. But, just basically they're so excited for the franchise. She said it's the hardest thing that she's having right now is to practice patience, that she can't say anything and she wants to tell everybody everything. But she's just really excited about the beauty and culture of the Klingons. That's something you kind of think of with Vulcans. You don't think of as having sort of a beauty aesthetic as well, but they do. So it's interesting. It's like the two different sides of these cultures. One that is completely logical, and one that sort of comes across, at least from the story that's been painted so far, as warlike. They both have this sort of innate love of culture and beauty. So that's the three people that I've reached out to, and I messaged Neville Page, who is the person who actually designed the Klingons, but he had not gotten back to me at the time of the recording.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. Right on. So the Klingons are ever changing, and I personally think it's frustrating that people get upset with the changing look. I don't really care what the Klingons look like. I don't, a lot of people said right off the bat, they look like the Klingons from the Kelvin timeline. And to me, that doesn't matter because the Klingons have always changed the way they look. They've never looked the same. Worf didn't look the same from season 1 to season 7, and that's one character, and we've had precedent for different looking Klingons with Chang, and Worf, and like all these different Klingons on the screen at the same time. The Klingons have always looked different, so the look of them doesn't matter. But honestly, there was an image that was floating around the internet for a while. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It was one of the new Klingons, and somebody had photoshopped like a Klingon wig on it. And once it had this hair, it looked like a Klingon to me. Like, it didn't look much different.
That's what confuses me, is that people are like, oh my God, what is that? I'm like, it's clearly a Klingon. I've shown that picture to people who have a vague knowledge of Star Trek or maybe seen an episode or two, and I'm like, okay, you don't know what this is. Tell me what you think it is. Like, I don't know. It looks like a Klingon. I'm like, yes, that's what it is. It's just like, I feel like people are willfully being ignorant about what it is just to prove a point or something. It's like it's not that different.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Neville Page, when he was in Vegas, he talked a lot about what he had done with the Klingons, and the photographs he showed, he even broke down the skull of what the Klingon skull is. I mean, you remove the skin and what the skull is and what their different ridges. He had identifications of the different ridges, and there are sensors in between the ridges, and the hair covers up some of those sensors, so the Klingons that have hair don't have sensitivity sensitivity for a Klingon, but, can't feel the things that Klingons that have bald heads, can feel. I'm sure Aaron can understand that as well.
Right. And I mean, Worf doesn't need sensitivity because we had Deanna Troi for that, right? She was the sensitive counselor, right, Tim?
Who?
Right on.
No, I love that Neville breaks things down from a biological ground up. He does that with pretty much everything that he designs. So I think that if you ask him what something's for, he'll have an answer. It might be a BS answer because it's science fiction or something like that, but he has thought about these things. So I feel like everybody who's putting together, from the ships to the Klingons to the clothing, they all have a reason for what they're doing. Yes, it looks good, but it goes beyond that, which I think is like all we can hope for in a well put together TV show.
And they feel the pressure from the fans. They know that we
dumb.
are all looking at this and
Yes.
don't mess it up.
And they're not like, oh well, I don't care what they say. And like none of these people are terrified. I think that something's going to happen, and they're like, I'll say the wrong thing, and suddenly I'm going to be a pariah at a convention or something. So,
well, that thing that Jason Isaacs said, where he's like, I don't care what the hardcore fans think, right? And it got completely blown out of proportion, right? It's like right. I don't know. It's just I think it got blown out of proportion, but that's what.
Well, and there's a certain point you have to stop, thinking about what everyone else is thinking because you just become paralyzed. Mm-hmm. And when you're doing a creative endeavor, as much as, yes, you should take in, for something that's a 50-year-old franchise, you kind of have to take into consideration everything. But there's a point where you have to be like, okay, we have a creative vision and we're moving forward. I'm sure Mike Schindler has talked about this before, where it's like, you're a director. You're not a president. You're not like taking votes. It's a dictatorship, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are actors, and being on Star Trek is unlike any other TV show there is. I mean, they are going to be forever those characters that they play, and they're going to be going to conventions and everything else. And you step into that world. I mean, you don't have conventions all over the country for any other TV show like you do Star Trek.
You haven't been to the Golden Girls convention?
I'm old. I'm not that old.
Yeah, when they're 85, they're going to be on like some sort of holocast or something like that.
And don't diss the Golden Girls. I've watched them.
I love the Golden Girls. I'm not dissing the Golden Girl. I love the Golden Girls.
I hear a podcast coming, the Golden Girl podcast.
Oh,
okay.
Man.
I'm the gay guy who missed the Golden Girls, Gene. I'm like, it's just an 80s sitcom that doesn't do anything for me. Yeah.
Aaron, I spell a Patreon bonus content where Aaron and I live watch a Golden Girls episode.
Oh, man, I'm so there.
And that's where I sign off.
I guess, anyways, just before we go here, does anybody have any more final thoughts they'd like to say about the Klingons in general? I mean, we're just having a general discussion. We don't know much yet.
Right.
There's not much to go off of.
Conversation to have.
Yeah. Right. So, Richard, did you have any final thoughts on the Klingons or the Golden Girls?
No Golden Girls. I'm excited. I mean, there's not much to go off of. I can't even tell you how excited I am once I saw all those pictures that Amy was posting, and as well as Tim and everyone was posting what was at Star Trek Vegas. I just, oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how excited I am.
The crazy details on the 3D printed armor and
that's what I mean.
Like,
it's amazing.
Little faces, and it's just crazy. It's amazing.
It's exciting times to be a Star Trek fan. That's for sure.
You bet. Tim, any final thoughts?
Yeah, when I first heard about Discovery being made, and then I heard that they were going to have the Klingons in there, I was upset. I said, let's go someplace new. Don't go where we've already been. I don't want to rehash, old wars that we heard a little bit about, but let's start fresh. But I tell you, after hearing the actors, after hearing the writers in Vegas, and after seeing what they're doing in the way of costumes and the weapons, and I am totally on board with the Klingons in the show. I mean, and they're going to have standalone episodes apparently too, so that's going to be fun. They're going to show the Klingons in depth, which good. I want to see it.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I was much like Tim. I was just sort of like, oh, okay, again, all right. And there had been a certain fan film that was out that was also set around the Klingons, and it just seemed like it had been a place that we had gone many, many times before. But this feels fresh in a really interesting way. So I'm excited to see more about the history, more about the culture, and I'm excited to see what the actors bring to it that's different than what other ones have done, because they're going to have their own take on what a Klingon is. We've seen Worf it's funny because Worf really isn't even your standard Klingon from what we understand. So it's like watching him for an entire, run of a show is kind of the equivalent of almost like all the other Klingons that we've seen. Now when we pull out, we're going to get even more depth than we would have got if we had just been watching Worf. Mm-hmm. So now we've got, like, we're not just watching the TNG era, we're watching that plus this part of the earlier Klingon history and other something that's not just Qo'noS, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Well, yeah, I got not much more to add to that myself. I mean, I'm excited. We're only a couple of weeks away, and I really can't wait to see what's going to be happening. I mean, this is a very exciting time. I'm very happy to be on this podcast, to be able to talk about the new episodes when they start. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Before we sign off here, I did want to make a note of a little bit of news here. So David Mack had tweeted the other day that it was just a couple weeks until his original novel, Desperate Hours, is coming out. And I asked him, I said, if we find it early on the shelves, because sometimes bookstores release books early, they just put them on the shelves because they don't really care. I said, do you recommend waiting until we watch the pilot? And he responded, he said, if you find a copy of Desperate Hours before September 24th, know that it does contain spoilers for the 2-part pilot. So tread at your own risk. If you get it early, maybe wait until the Monday and you're still reading it before most of the other people anyways. So I know that I'm going to be reading that book, but I'm definitely going to wait for the 2-hour pilot before I start it myself. So I'm looking forward to that. Excellent. Right on. Well, the Golden Girls is not the only thing we've been discussing here on the network this week. So take a quick listen to this clip and see what else you may have missed elsewhere on Geriatric Trek FM.
Hey, was that a dig on me?
Maybe.
Okay.
Sounded like it.
Previously on Trek.fm, Literary Treks.
Oh, Matthew, I'm doing just fine. It's always fun every week to hop on here and talk Star Trek books and comics with you. And I don't know if you realize this, Matthew, but this is our 200th episode of Literary Wait a minute, Matthew. We don't host this show anymore.
Standard Orbit.
Well, I think everything comes back to the naked time for him, and he just can't get away from swords.
Running around with a sword.
Just running around with a sword. So maybe it was this episode that started that whole thing, but man, yeah, it's kind of an odd thing that he's defined by a sword in his hand,
The 602 Club.
I honestly was thrilled with the way that they set it up because, like you said, sort of like Russian dolls, I guess, is a good way to explain it. You introduce one character in this existing show, and then it leads to that character's own show, which leads to the next one's own show.
And introducing The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
But if I ended up missing an episode, I would record 45 minutes of blank space on my VHS tape, and then I would wait until it came around, and then I would put the episode in its proper order.
This explains so much.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
So check out all these shows and join in on the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and the Golden Girls. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, please be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on your iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or even the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and a written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, and in most third-party apps, including all those ones very popular in St. Olaf. And you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place is to join in the larger conversation on the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the search field, and it should come right up. Ask to join, and we'll let you right in. If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select The Edge. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Richard, where can people find you when you're not defending Captain Kirk from murdering the Klingon Chancellor?
Well, they can find me on Facebook and the Babel Conference. I'm also on Twitter. My handle's xransom. And they could also hear me on Earl Grey, where my co-hosts Amy Nelson and Justin Ozer, we talk about everything that's TNG.
Tim, where can people find you when you're not complaining that your gach is half dead?
You can find me on Twitter at Tim Robertson56. I hang out in the Babel Conference as well, and I also have my own podcast for those amateur astronomers in the world. It's called The Observer's Notebook. It's the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers, an organization I've been along to since the early 70s. So if you have a telescope, want to check that out, just look for The Observer's Notebook. It's available everywhere.
Excellent. Aaron, when can people find you when you're not fine-tuning that second cover for the official Star Trek Discovery comic book coming out?
Thank you. Well, you can find me on Twitter at user GeekFilter. I'm also hanging out in the Babel Conference quite a bit, and you can find my artwork on the network. I'm the network art director.
Excellent.
And I also host Saturday Morning Trek, our animated series and all things Trek in the 1970s podcast, which I always forget when I'm on another podcast.
Excellent. And when I'm not staring at Lursa and Bator's open breast window, you can find me here on the network with new episodes of Warp 5, which is all about Star Trek Enterprise. And you can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network with my friends Chris and Tom. And we have a little show called Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast. And our episode that's going to be launching in September, because we only do one a month, is going to be all about Bates Motel Season 1, which had many episodes directed by our favorite half-Klingon female engineer, Roxanne Dawson. And I'd like to take a second before we go to thank our associate producers here on The Edge. We've got the wonderful Norman C. Lau, the honorable Tony Robinson, the crazy warrior Thomas Puelo, the amazing engineer Lisa Slack, and the wonderful cook who's got his own restaurant on D Space Nine, Shoaib Mirza. Thanks, guys, for supporting The Edge and supporting Trek FM. Well, that's about all I've got for you guys today. So why don't you tune in next time and see what we've been doing out on the edge of Federation space.